Blue Collar Millionaires. It's Chris and Kevin here, and we have got Kaleb Marti. This dude is a beast. I met him a few years ago through another mastermind. Saw him on a panelist at that mastermind talking about business ownership. Caught my attention. This was actually at a real estate mastermind, but they were still talking about business because whether you're in real estate or you've got your own business, business is business when you're running systems and teams. There's strategies, there's tips that will help you grow faster and keep you from getting as much gray hair. So Kaleb has an incredible story. This dude has a ton of multifamily real estate, commercial real estate, and multiple businesses. And he started at such a, what would you call it, Kaleb? Just a very modest, humble beginning. Yeah, man. So Kaleb, tell us where you started and where you're at now, and then we'll kind of dive into what allowed you to get there.
So starting out, I mean, I grew up doing construction, like the water lines, lateral fields. I did some underhouse plumbing for people, but not very much. I mean, I started that at 8 years old. Wow. So by the time I was 18, I was looking to go out into the workforce, and I had already been in construction 10 years, not full time, but I mean, of an evenings with my dad and on weekends. And I was pretty burnt out, to say the least, at 18 years old with construction. And my parents really pushed me to go to college. So I went to college for computer programming. Absolutely. Wow. I was sitting in class and the kid beside me had just built a video game that weekend. And I was like, we're just not. This isn't me. You guys are way smarter than me on this stuff. And I still learned how to program, but I kind of figured out at that point I probably needed to go back, to step back a little bit. The wages for what I was going to school for were less than I was making in the construction field.
Oh, wow.
So after a 4-year degree, I would have been making a little bit less than what. And that was even saying I was going to go out and get a great job.
Yeah.
Out of the gate. So kind of set back and I was like, this is dumb. If I could go work prevailing jobs and make 80 to 100 grand a year, even though it's hard work and I was burnt out with it, I was like, it just doesn't make sense to me. So I went back to doing the construction job and dropped out of school, kind of floated over into the auto side a little bit. I was building race cars and stuff for myself on the side and started getting some of my friends from the drag strip and stuff that was paying me to program their cars because I kind of took the computer science side and computer technology and merged it with hot rods and automotive. The softwares that were $30,000 to $40,000 to buy to tune exotic cars and sports cars, I wrote myself.
Wow.
And so I could, instead of having to pay per car where I'd hook up to it and the dealer would charge me $200 a car, I didn't have that. So I could charge $300 to $1,500, depending on the car and how complicated it was. I could charge them and make a better margin than everybody else in the industry just because I had that computer software. So I was just doing that on the side. I wasn't, at that time, I didn't realize how much value there was in what I was doing. It was just kind of my hobby, but I was still making a little bit of a decent income and doing the construction full time. Then a hot rod shop that I was doing tuning for on the side figured out they're paying me as much a year to tune on the side as what they could just hire me full time for. And so I went over to work for that hot rod shop for a while. And this whole time, my shop was just kind of growing off to the side, working those 6 p.m. to midnight hours, just trying to keep up on that side business. And I want to say it was 2011 or 12, I got fired from that hot rod shop for doing work on the side, even though they hired me because I was doing work on the side and they knew I was doing that. But is what really happened is my painter he was painting on the side for me as well. And he wanted to go to a SEMA show in Vegas because we built a car and it made it to the SEMA show. And I needed to stay and work because I was too far behind, but he wanted to go stand at SEMA in Vegas with the car that he had painted and show off. And the owner of the shop said, no, you're not going to the SEMA show. We've got too much work to do here. So he just said, well, I quit. owner of the shop said, well, where are you going to go work? He's like, I'm just going to go work for Kaleb. Like, you too, need to make money. And so all of a sudden my boss called me into the office. He's like, Kaleb, we need to talk. And I went in there and he's like, this isn't working out. You can't work here anymore. And I kind of laughed because I knew how much revenue I was making then. I thought it was a joke because we kind of, the service business, everybody screws up everybody in it. So I was laughing and I could see on his face he was serious. And it's like, oh man, I'm fired. And he's like, yeah. So I just got up and he's like, and you can just leave right now. We'll set your toolbox and everything else outside later. I was like, okay. Wow. So walked out. I lost my house loan, my shop loan, because it wasn't wrapped up yet. And ended up having to put all the cash I had saved up for my shop into my house to save it. So I was 40 grand into the down payment on a $75,000 or $80,000 house, and then paid 11% interest on it at a bank that would just write a note. It was horrible to say the least. Then shortly after that, I was pretty much full bore into my own shop, but I didn't have heat. I didn't have electricity. I didn't have a bathroom, didn't have a concrete floor. And so I was like, how the heck am I going to ask people with $80,000 to $250,000 cars to come to my shop to get them worked on if I don't even have concrete floors or electricity in it? And to my surprise, the people really didn't care whenever I left that business or left that hot rod shop and they found out that I opened my own place. I was doing work for a third of what the other place was charging. And so they just, almost all the customers there just transferred over to me.
So how did you grow? How did people know about what you were doing? Was it just word of mouth, or were you trying to do some kind of advertising?
So I was doing my own version of advertising, but it was not well done. I was just making it up as I went, right? Instead of having a Facebook page, I made a Facebook profile, like it was just a person, which worked. We got up to maybe 800 to 1,000 friends pretty quick on that account. And then I was just posting different vehicles we were working on or services we provided. And then word of mouth kind of got out at that point and started building up some work. And I got kind of lucky because a guy probably 15 minutes from us had closed down his shop. He was a 20-year veteran on auto mechanic, owning his own business. And he just got burnt out dealing with the customer base. So he retired and he came to work for me for $500 a week. And this is a guy that probably one of the best techs in the nation. And so with him and I together, we were really able to, of course, he made significantly more money than that years following. But I remember that first year going, how the heck am I going to be able to afford to pay this guy $500 a week when I'm barely surviving myself? A lot of that was I didn't know the value and what services I was offering. I was just I was $30 an hour shop rate where everybody else was 90 to 100. And
what caused you to change that? That's a key factor. Figuring out like, wait, I shouldn't be getting 30. I should be getting 90 or whatever
honestly,
it is.
It was another shop owner that I did a lot of tuning for. I've made more money tuning than doing the service labor, but I built a lot of relationships with other area shops. And a lot of them guys were 50 to 65 years old. They just had that experience. And every one of them was telling me, like, Kaleb, it is cheaper for me to have a customer bring a car to me and me haul it to you to finish and then go pick it up and bring it back. And I make more than you whenever I bill it to the customer and you did all the work. And I was like, I don't care if you send it to me, you can make all the money you want as long as I'm getting the work. And then finally one of them was like, dude, you double your shop rate right now. And it just, I remember that anxiety that came over me. I'm going to run off 90% of my customer base if I double my price. And he just it took him probably 3 or 4 months to finally convince me to just double it. And he's like, I promise you, if you double it, you'll be busier then than you are now. And he was right. I doubled our shop rate and I got even busier. And he said he was trying to force. So I went from 30 to 60 and he was trying to get me to go from 60 to 120. And I just couldn't do it. So I went to 70 and there were still 30 or 40 cars at a time outside to be worked on. And so then we went to 70 to 80 and just slowly worked up. And we never caught up. It was just, but he was right in the fact that
I love what he said. You'll be busier if you do
Yeah.
that. It's
And
true.
I did not believe it, but he's like, Caleb, you need to be driving the nicest vehicles, the nicest trucks, the nicest everything if you want to get high end clients. He's like, you can't afford to do that on $30 an hour.
Right.
Whenever I started buying the Lambos and the Audis, the Corvettes, everything else, it's hard to get somebody to bring you a Z06 Corvette if you don't have a Z06 Corvette out there to show them a finished product. And I started with the Z06 originally, and all of a sudden I had cars from all over the country coming to bring me their Z06 Corvette to work on it because I kind of dove into that niche and said, I want to be the best in the industry at this. And we weren't the best in the industry at that. I don't believe we ever made it to that point, but I would say we were probably one of the most profitable in the industry in that class of car.
What did your time look like? Because I mean, like I'm listening to you talk, but at the same time, I know that you were probably all work and then you went to sleep and then you woke back up, and it's because it was your passion. Is that how your lifestyle looked?
Yeah, I mean, it was. So at one time we were running 3 shifts in the shop, because we had a probably 9,500 square foot building by the time we got it all built out. And we had it packed, every bay 2 deep, cars on lifts, cars under lifts. I mean, we were just working on everything we could work on. And I had to run 3 shifts to keep up. And there was most nights only a couple hours that I could actually get any sleep, because mechanics I love them, but they're really bad about if they run into this tiniest problem, they'll just sit back, put their hands in their pockets and wait for somebody to come solve their very minor problem instead of completing the rest of the job. And so I was my business was right by my house. So I kind of get them started for the night, and I'd try and go in and go to sleep and then be back to help them wrap up and get the new shift coming in. And so I might go to bed at midnight to 2 o'clock, but by 4 to 5 o'clock, I was getting phone calls of issues from that third shift. Excuse me. So I would say I think that was probably 2.5 years that we did that third shift. And then finally I couldn't take it anymore. It was just, I mean, I was getting sick because I wasn't getting enough sleep. Stress was so high. I mean, I was almost always sick from something, and I never get sick now, but I think stress was just so high on trying to keep up that volume. Because on my labor alone, I produced about $900,000 a year in revenue for the business, plus what my techs were doing. And I was out producing 4 techs on my own revenue, and then still trying to run the business. I mean, it was killing me.
So what got you out of the mechanic side? What finally transitioned you out of that?
Really real estate, starting to go to, well, I say that. I mean, I bought a pizza place that was distressed and turned it around. I bought a pizza place for $25,000, and I don't think it had a profit. I can't remember the numbers, but old owners really didn't have any businesses that cheap, really don't even have books, right? I mean, it was just kind of bought the name and inventory and thought I could turn it around. And they had good reviews, like they had a good product, but they didn't have good advertising. By this point, I kind of figured social media out. I built an Instagram page that had 50-some thousand followers for the exotics and hot rods and all that stuff. And so I had a client base. And so my idea was to take those followers and push other businesses that I bought, transfer them from one business to another. And that worked really well for us. But I had a lot to learn on actually managing businesses that weren't auto repair shops, right? Like everything's a little bit different. And the pizza industry, it's kind of interesting because I should have went back on this earlier. The pizza business probably helped me with charging more than what even the guy telling me to double my price. I was so scared to hand somebody a $4,000 or $5,000 bill in my shop, because it was only once a week I was handing out those big bills. But at the pizza place, cashing people out, you're handling $10, $20, $30 transactions just all night long. And it kind of numbed me a little bit, maybe, to that process of handing a customer a bill. And if they weren't happy, being able to come to an agreement that they were happy and I was still profitable. Like somebody comes in, they complain about their pizza. Great, here's a free one. Sorry you had any trouble whatsoever. In the shop, it was a little bit different because you had materials in there, but I think that made me more comfortable with handing those big bills out. Just having seeing how little people valued money a lot of times. Like big bills are big bills, but most of the time people don't know how much work they put into $20, let alone $5,000.
I think also there's a mental block there because you're selling a product and we undervalue what we are worth. And you were selling your knowledge in the mechanic shop compared to the pizza being a product that was getting sold. So it's harder for you to justify that higher ticket margin because we just undervalue what we bring to the table the majority of the time.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I still do it to this day. I mean, I'm bad about that. Yeah, I should be more conscious of that, but that's probably one of my biggest issues is undervaluing my time.
Yeah. And especially when you're so busy, it makes no sense to be charging a lower rate. Yeah. I did this I had a landscape business when I was young and I was charging $25 an hour and maybe I was paying my guys 10 or 12. I thought that was good. You know, when we were doing cleanups, we could never finish. It was like a rush before the snow. It was so stressful. And then my mom was marrying this man, and at their house, he said, "Oh, I'm paying him $35 an hour." And he was like so happy. And I said, 35. And then he says, "You need to charge more." And I ended up getting $40 an hour. I think I lost like 3 clients.
Yeah.
And it was like that winter, I had more money than I ever had.
Yeah.
I was almost pissed at myself because I looked back at like 4 years and I was doing the numbers one day and I was like, there's like tens of thousands of dollars here. A little more than that.
I've never heard anybody complain about and said they made a mistake by raising their prices.
Never.
Everybody's scared of doing it. Everybody's afraid they're going to ruin their business and lose customers. But when they actually get on the backside of doing it, every one of them say, "I wished I'd have done it earlier."
Always.
Well, I mean, if you look at the service industry, if you're an honest person running a reputable business, doing good work, you can charge whatever you want.
Yep.
Like, I like you guys are saying, I wish I would have figured that out sooner, but I was just so deathly scared of I just thought the way I was running my business, I wasn't tracking the numbers like I should. So every single day I was trying to take on new work because I was afraid of running out of it, even though we were so snowballed under. And I wasn't keeping track of how much money we were actually making because I was putting so much into new equipment, finishing out the buildings. I didn't understand how cash flow statements worked. I was just lost. If I would have sat back and looked at how much money we were actually making that was going to growing the business, knowing I could have slowed down at any time and turned that really into cash flow, I probably would have slept better at night, probably would have ran a more efficient and more profitable business by.
Absolutely.
Kaleb, you did this all in, what's the name of the town you're in, Joplin?
Jasper is where I actually started. Yeah.
It's a smaller town, right?
Yeah. That was a town of 900 people that I started.
And you had all this work. So were these people all coming from different areas?
Yeah. Originally, it was kind of from our 4-state area. There's people just very local to us. And then we started getting people from Dallas, North Dakota, Wyoming, some East and West Coast customers. But we figured out all the high-end cars were traveling through. We've got an intersection of I-44 and I-49, and all these high-end cars were crossing about 10 miles from us, going to shops 6 hours away from us. And so I started really marketing a lot and going to a lot of the racing events and doing some YouTube channel stuff, just trying to get in front of those high-end clients and get out and meet them, right? Like if I want to go get a bunch of customers to bring me their Lamborghinis to work on, I need to have my Lamborghini at the same event they're at and build a really relationship with the people, because their car is like family to them. And so they have to know that they're sending it with somebody that's going to care for it, as much as they would.
I think that's extremely important. part of marketing that you just touched on is, I mean, if you can sit there and go straight to the source or to your referral partners, the people that touch your customers day in, day out, that is the best plan. Like going and spending a bunch of money on Google ads and SEO marketing, that's one aspect of it, but that's not where you should start if you're limited on money and you have time. You go and build the relationships, go to the events, go and meet those people. Like I was just talking to a guy that does cleanings, and I said, go meet with your realtors, because your realtors are talking to customers that have houses for sale and they're motivated to make them look nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what you did by going to the races was genius, and a lot of people skip over that.
And what you did about having your own really nice cars. I think that's the key. That's a huge key to it too. They have to see that you have that, right?
Yep.
And they pull up in your thing. Same thing with Chris, like your van and my van are really nice. Guys don't want to spend money. I had shit trucks and vans too. I think it's a horrible representation of your business.
Yeah.
Well, you look like
I look at that as a homeowner now. When people come to my thing, when they have a nice, clean, and the guy, I'm so much more open to spend a lot of money.
Yeah. And
I feel like they know what they're doing
when they pull
I feel like they know.
And are they really doing that good in business, or is this somebody that in 10 years I'm going to have a warranty issue or whatever it may be, and I can't we saw that in the mechanic field all the time, and I use that as far as our marketing is concerned. We had the best warranties in the industry, and I said, we're going to be here to support those warranties, where these other shops were just coming up and disappearing all the time, and they're trying to undercut us on price. It's like, we're not going to be the cheapest in town, but whenever you have a problem, we're still going to be here to fix it, where these other guys drop out and you got to pay for it a second time. And we really built up, especially with, really guys like you that had service-based businesses. Those were our best clients because they dropped their vehicles off at 5 p.m. and I'd make sure they had them back for their employees to pick up at 8 a.m. the next morning.
Wow, that's huge.
They had no downtime. I mean, it was normally they'd have a backup vehicle, but usually when they started with me, they didn't. I had those small plumbing companies, small excavation companies, some farmers, and if they never had to break revenue while they were getting their vehicles worked on or serviced. I mean, we did engine swaps overnight and transmission swaps overnight for them.
High quality, it sounds like, is what y'all produced, and high value because y'all were willing to do whatever it took to make the customer successful on their back end. So what happened to this business? Did you sell it? Did you dissolve it because you left and went on?
Yeah, so I just ended up dissolving it. We were kind of at that point where it had my name on it and reputation. And the business, I think I could have sold in that 800,000 to 1.4 million range. It wasn't a high mechanic shops, especially in a small town right next to my own house. It just wasn't a good sellable product. Yeah. So I would have never made enough money off of it to really justify the damage it could cause to my brand if I sold it and somebody didn't take care of the client like I wanted. And I wanted to be able to use the reputation of that business going into other businesses or transactions with it helps me in the real estate industry, because if somebody doesn't know my real estate brand, chances are they were driving past my billboards on the highways. And I always had clever stuff like your wife is hot, get your AC fixed, and just crazy stuff like that. So I'd say, you remember the wife is hot billboard? And they'd be like, oh yeah. And like, that was me in Jasper. That was my shop. And so then it kind of build that rapport right out of the gate with some of the sellers that we deal with.
Also, Kaleb, did you have any of the people who used to bring these high-end cars and invest in real estate with you starting off or now?
No, I probably should have, but I always felt so inferior to those guys bringing those cars in, dropping $50,000 to $70,000. That they were always very good to me and very nice, but I could just always tell that they were here and I was here. And so it was for me to, I was their mechanic. So it's hard to call them and say, hey, and looking back, now it wouldn't bother me a bit to do it, but then pride was just standing in my way, which is usually always my biggest issue on stuff.
That's a good point. It is hard if you call it like as a mechanic, but if they admire you, and I know they did when they saw that and everything you're doing, and you have a conversation with them, it probably would have went very differently.
Oh, I think it would have. Like, I think looking back now, seeing how successful people really are, I was just so scared of them because I didn't know a single successful person outside of my customers. They were always kind of the most complicated to deal with, but it wasn't because they were bad people. They just knew what they wanted, and they set the expectation up front. And so it was always made me nervous trying to meet those expectations and not let them down. And turns out they would have done anything they could have to help me. I just didn't know that successful people did that, right? Like, all my friends were very unsuccessful, kind of greedy people. And not that they're bad people, it's just the way they were ingrained, in that small community. And so I didn't realize how much successful people really wanted to help and see others do well.
What started changing your mindset from the mechanic Kaleb to the Kaleb now that's got a ton of real estate, multiple businesses? There's a mindset shift that has happened, and you're still a very humble guy. I mean, people can tell right now by just watching this interview. You stay at this level. I mean, this is you all the time, no matter what's going on. I've never seen you like, whoa, what's going? That's just not you. Yeah. But there's been a mindset shift that's allowed you to really handle big money, big assets, big risk, big opportunities. Can you identify what things helped you move that mindset shift forward?
I would say it's probably a few things. Probably the first thing that I really noticed was once I had enough recurring income coming in that really money wasn't my issue, right? Like, I kind of stepped back, took control of my finances, and I was always tight. So I never overspent, but I just didn't have control of it, even though I was tight. So I got control of it. I knew where the money was going. I knew where the money was coming from. And I had enough rental property built up to where technically I'd never have to work again from that point forward. And so my shop wasn't controlling my life anymore. And at that point, I kind of realized what I wanted to do wasn't really about the money. Like, more money wasn't necessarily going to just drastically improve my life, even though it comes with a lot of things that obviously does make it better. But I really just kind of wanted the challenge again. I miss what the challenge was in starting my shop, and how much that just improved me as a person going through all of that stuff. And so I really started chasing, I don't think I knew it was self-improvement at that time, but I just kind of started looking at people that I respected and wanting to get to where they're at. Maybe it turned out to be a financial thing by how you measure it, but it was really the growing in business and solving problems, networking, relationships. The more I developed those relationships, the more I started becoming the person that I wanted to be. And it had very little to do with the money. I did want the big businesses. My goal was 1,000 employees. That's just not for me. I mean, I started going down that route, but we hit close to 100 employees. And maybe it wasn't that I didn't want 100 employees. I was just maybe in the wrong field to enjoy the 100 employees that we had. Some of those wages were $15 an hour and below. And it just wasn't a good quality of life for me on dealing with those.
That type of employee
didn't show up on time or at all. And
I know it.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I just refocused a lot on what I wanted, I guess.
It's draining. So where are you at with real estate now? How many units are you looking to get to, or where are you at now? How many do you have? I know you always have. How many plus and bust or something like that you put?
Yeah, so we were at 1,000 units or bust, and after our closings this month, we'll be probably just right over 1,000 units. Now that's probably 900 multifamily and 100 commercial. So some of those commercial units are $1 million per unit or something. So the asset values, it's kind of hard to justify or judge it by.
Units count doesn't matter. Yeah.
It really doesn't, but it's something that I was just targeting because I knew if I hit that point, I would at least be farther than I was at 800 units, right?
Right.
We've still got a bunch of storage units, stuff like that, but I'd say probably 600 storage units if I had to guess. But really our target started shifting from unit count to total asset value. And I really didn't like the syndication model much because the syndications I had invested in never performed like maybe some JV partnerships or the personal stuff I had owned. I mean, the expense ratios were disgusting. The operations were just always horrible. Putting it in the hands of management companies, they just did not manage them well. So I really kind of stepped back again at that point and said, I just want to own all the stuff myself, and I'll pay investors a high dividend, but I don't want the complications of filing individual tax returns on everything that we own. And just all the mess of not being able to buy at a high scale because it has to get separated out between entities.
So how do you do it now?
So now then, I'm sole owner of everything, but I do have a partnership with Mike Burns in Texas on a deal.
I know that deal.
Yeah, it's been pretty difficult.
Yeah,
But, I mean, Mike's working his butt off on it down there, but we'll still come out really good. It's just again, dealing with management companies and the ball's in somebody else's court all the time. And we just,
so that's the only time you did that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've had some in the past, but I've either sold my share or bought people out of them because it just didn't.
It wasn't working.
No, I mean, 9 times out of 10, it was me putting in all the money, signing the bank debt, and doing all the work. And just.
So what is your team? So you're buying the ones you're buying there in Missouri because your team's managing them and doing everything.
Yeah, so we're in Missouri and Kansas right now, which we're right on the line. So we probably stretch as far as about 50 miles apart from the farthest one away to the other farthest one, and we're dead center on them. But the major density for us is all within about a 5-mile radius. So it's very easy to maintain all of that stuff.
So you know every owner of every property you want, or who owns it at this point, right? And you're already targeting them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you have a
I know all pretty well. And I usually get that call first because if I've entered a contract, I've never backed out of a contract or didn't close something I contracted. And so if sellers have been through somebody 2 or 3 times or, 2 or 3 different buyers and they couldn't get it closed, normally the agents are saying it's time to call Kaleb, and his price may not be as good as what you were getting, but you're not going to go through this, what I would call a shit show, I guess, on trying to close some commercial properties. But
so what does your team look like managing all these properties?
Honestly, our team is really small. I've been really trying to condense it and get just higher quality people in place. So I've got my COO, office manager. I've got a property manager, leasing agent, and then an inspector. And so it's just 5 people in the office. And then we've got 2 maintenance guys and 4 or 5 remodelers. There's always that one that just kind of rotates in and out. So I never know whether there were 4 or 6 remodelers in there, but that's really our core team now.
With that team, and that's what type of expense ratio do you see for your properties, and as opposed to when you were doing syndications and stuff?
So last month we were at a 23% expense ratio, which is lower than what we have been. On average, we were about 27%, but each time we grow a little bit, that ratio comes down slightly just because we're not having to take on extra labor. So usually the labor comes down, and then materials, just because we're able to buy it, is just yet again another level of volume higher than what we were last year. Typically, when we take properties over, they're between a 45 and 60% expense ratio.
Yeah,
so we're usually half or better on.
It's a huge difference.
I mean, for us, I think we're at an $800,000 a month rent roll right now. So you start adding 20% of that back every month. I mean, it's pretty significant numbers, and what it does to the asset value on the back end is pretty drastic.
160 grand.
Yeah.
A month. Wow, that's impressive. So what about, are you going to run out of properties, you think, at some point in your area or in that thing, and you have to expand out, or are you okay with, are you just going to keep staying in that area? That's
so I'm really trying to get to maybe 4,000 units in this market. That'll be between residential and commercial before I move to another market. I may make a move, like if I get the opportunity to buy at least 300 unit package within an hour of me, Springfield, Northwest Arkansas, Tulsa area, I might look at go ahead and open another satellite office there. I just want to be able to put a manager, leasing agent, inspector, kind of the same staff we have here. I want to be able to do that exact same thing there and have my staff here grown just enough where we can help oversee and manage and train properly on that. But if we set up a really solid 4,000 unit portfolio here, we could take on $15 to $20 million in debt over there, and it wouldn't really disrupt our cash flow, even if they were non-profitable at that point.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
When you bring on investors, how do you structure that for them?
So that's changed a lot over the years, because at first I was trying to sell the syndication model that everybody was doing, right? Whereas a percentage of equity, a percentage of cash out refi, just all these complicated things. And I found that most investors that just had a lot of cash did not understand the equity and all that stuff. Because if they were business owners, normally they weren't real estate owners. So they didn't understand equity in real estate, because equity in business can be hard to turn to cash without selling it. It's hard to do a cash out refi on a business. So a lot of them just didn't understand it. So finally I just switched it over to, you can have second lien position on the property. We'll pay 15% interest only every month, and you can call it in 90 days. Some of them said, well, we started having another group of people that said, I want to use my liquidity to be profitable, but I need access to it in 30 days. And so I just set it up where they could have access to so much. I try and mold it to each investor that wants to come on with us. But whenever I say, raising capital, I'm not good at it, because I'm not good at calling and asking. And most of them want that. They're like, just call me next time you have a deal.
Yeah.
I'm not good at it. Like, if they call me and say, hey, they want to invest, and I'll tell them what deals we have, and they'll wire me money. And
it's easy. Yeah.
It's really easy, but I've probably only got $1 million right now in capital from outside investors. Okay. And most of them are pretty close, or people that I've met and got pretty close with here recently. But it's simple. I mean, I try to take the complicated side out of it to where it made sense to me and them. And that makes sense.
That makes sense.
So
what about the capitalist cartel you got with the Butler brothers? I think it's really interesting. And Jeremy was at the Dealmaker event with me. He's so humble and low key.
Oh yeah.
It's doing really well. I know some people in it really like it. Tell us about that, and then if anybody wants to get in it, how it works.
So the capitalist cartel started because we had just came from, I can't remember if it was one of Tim's events or where we had came from. And man, we need to have something where we can all get together on our own too. And also try and figure out a way to monetize it. And so that's where we came up with the capitalist cartel, where we charge, it's closed right now, but we were $200 a month. And I think when we reopen it, it's going to be $250 a month. And it'll probably be open for 2 months, open enrollment, and then we'll probably close it down again. We try and share as much knowledge as we have in real estate and business. Obviously, you guys share a lot more on the business side than what we have, because we don't have as many businesses as what you guys have. But I do try and show a lot of what I'm working on in the group and how I structure stuff. maybe new ideas and techniques that are working good for us at the time. I'm very active in the real estate side and probably getting more active in the business as we progress into this next market, I guess, looking for that new business purchase. But,
and what do you guys do? Weekly calls?
Yeah, we do a weekly call every Tuesday. Then it's kind of an open forum for questions when people have questions on earnest money or contracts, whatever it may be. I mean, there's 180 people in there with probably just as much or more knowledge than what I have, jumping on there to try and help them correct their issue or get them to the next level.
I think it's great because, that's part of the, while I'm doing this. So you got that kind of idea after leaving one of Tim Brotz's events.
I think that's what it was. It was one of those, or I can't remember. It seems like that's what it was.
Well, yeah, when I saw one of your fishing trips,
yeah,
and it just like appealed to me. I'm like, that's the kind of stuff. Like I can see people, like I could see a group of people with myself doing something like that. So I really have been following that. I think it's great because we didn't have any of that. You're on your island. When you were in your mechanic shop doing all that and sleeping, it's like there's no one to talk to. You can't Google this shit.
No, it wasn't there. Like I'm seeing guys now entering the marketplace. It's like, man, you have so much opportunity here if you're not taking advantage of it. Like reading every single post you can on Facebook or in these groups, getting on all the calls. I mean, if I would have had 10 guys in a group telling me to raise my price, I probably would have done it sooner than the one guy telling me, I would have went back right then. I mean, just after a lot of the times of meeting up with all you guys, I always came back with something to implement in my business that I maybe didn't see the value. I saw the value, but I didn't see how largely it could impact my entire operation by making one small adjustment. And just incredible to be a part of stuff like this.
It's a way virtually to get around big people doing what you want to do, because you don't even have to meet them in person. And it gets you that borrowed belief. Like when I was younger, I always wanted to go into bigger jobs, like commercial jobs, apartment complexes. But like I had these blocks that maybe I'm not good enough, I'm not big enough, I don't have the nice enough trucks. I had all these reasons. And then when I did it, of course, it took off and went well. And guys who work for me who now have their own companies. I have a couple guys who started their own gutter and roofing companies. All they do is commercial stuff because they don't know anything else. And they just learned from me and watched it. So that's this. Then I used to think, what if I was telling thousands of people this all the time?
Yeah.
And they were like, this guy's not smarter than me. Like I could do this too.
Like absolutely.
It's like real estate. We know Tim and all you guys you can show somebody how to buy hundreds of units.
Yeah.
They get it. They watch it. They're like, I can do this. That's what I want to show. Like you can make millions of dollars in the service.
And really not know much outside of that one thing. You might not be, the best at another thing, but if you get really good at business, you don't really have to be great at much else.
Here's what I like about social media is it normalizes it. I know I've lost my camera, but it normalizes whatever you're trying to get into, and it brings that belief to you that you can get involved. Because when you feel like you got to be unique to accomplish something, it puts a barrier up mentally for you. But when you're seeing multiple people do it and social media allows you to see that, it just makes it feel a little more achievable.
Absolutely.
Kaleb, you made a post about your experiences in business and at the different levels of net income and gross revenue for each business. Can you kind of review that post? Because I think there's a lot of people on here that would like to hear your reasoning behind if you were going to get into business again, would you start one? Would you acquire it? And what those 3 things maybe that allow a business to create the most speed and scale the fastest. Because we've all heard stories where people have started a business and sold it a year later and for 7 figures or higher. And then other people that's been doing it for 15 years and they just can't seem to get past this certain revenue point.
Yeah, that's a really good question and observation. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I felt like that $1 million a year barrier in revenue was really hard to get past.
Yep.
Like I don't know what it was about that specifically, but I see that a lot in other people's businesses. They hover in that 800 to $1 million, and they're just stressed and overworked because there's not enough payroll there sometimes to hire out the positions needed. Not saying that you can't, but you have to get that knowledge that you need to take it to the next level or to operate profitably with the payroll you have available. And with me, I went into businesses that were probably too small early on because I thought it's all I could afford. Like I was putting the 20 or 30 grand down to buy the distressed business and their assets, and then trying to sell off some of their assets that we didn't use to recoup some of my down payment money while also trying to grow the business. And really those businesses that did, I can't remember the post verbatim, but really under $100,000 just beat the brakes off of me in net income. If they did 100,000 in net income or less, I was just constantly involved. I mean, whether it was multiple phone calls a day or somebody not showing up and I didn't have the extra staff to cover for them. After a couple of years of dealing with those businesses, I really got to where I just didn't care for them anymore. I didn't show them the attention that they needed to still remain as profitable as what they needed to be. So in 2020, I started selling off some of those smaller ones to make sure that the next seller could show it or buyer could show it the attention that it needed. And I really like the 300,000 and up businesses, but it wasn't until I hit 500,000 in net income that I really started to notice some of the freedoms that came with that kind of net profit. And when you've got that much net profit, you're not afraid to go hire the COO or the operations manager that can take a lot off your plate.
Yeah.
But below that, you know, a person in the Midwest could spend 300 grand a year of the cash flow. But once you start breaking past 300 grand a year in cash flow, there's not a lot to spend it on in the Midwest. I mean, you can have the nicest house, the nicest cars, the nicest everything you want and still live comfortably on 300,000 a year. So you start getting past that and all of a sudden you're building up big cushions. Not much is going to disrupt you at that point.
I totally agree. That $1 million barrier, it was a problem for me for years because you can be kind of doing everything yourself. You know, I had people working on the actual doing the jobs, but I was doing all the inside stuff and you get burnt out, but then you can you're making money, you're making some good money, or you feel like you are. So you're like, oh, it's not broke, don't fix it. But I totally agree. Once you get over that 500, that's when all the freedoms come. Because you can hire a really good person. Like he's smarter than you. He's better than you at this, or he's definitely better at certain things. That's when all the freedoms come. I've made the same mistakes. The only reason I would buy a business, because I am right now with a partner, but he's going to run it. So that's part of it. That doesn't have big, that's under say 350 or 300 is because it's a bolt-on. Because I'm bolting it on and then I'm going to connect it with all my Gutter King in that area in Ohio and it's going to take off.
You've already got the cool app that lets that come in and it's not.
That's the only reason, right? So if you're doing a landscaping business and you're netting 400 or 500 grand and you go buy another one that's netting 800, you're just going to connect it. It's not like you have to run that business separate. But I tell that I had a friend, he was doing the same thing. He's retired and he has money and he was looking at these little businesses netting 80 grand. And then he says, well, what do you think? I said, I think you're going to have a job. I think guys aren't going to show up and you're going to be out there doing the work. You don't have enough, or you're going to take money out of your savings to pay. I said, I hate this business. Chris, when you were doing the tanning salon, I didn't like that one either.
Hey, I think we both said that to Chris. Remember that in Austin, Chris?
Thank God it never closed. It actually fell apart right there at the end because of some little financial things that came up during due diligence, and it didn't close. But everybody was like, "Dude, what are you doing?" It's way too small. Why are you think? I was like, yeah, but this is going to be 24 automated. And, but everybody was like, nope, mistake. So
you would have been in there working on
one.
tanning salon machines.
That's exactly like dry cleaners. Like it,
yeah.
Great little business, made money, but it kept me awake at night, like just frustrated. And it wasn't like it really was any work for me. I don't know that I spent 5 hours a month on the thing, but I thought about it 24 hours a day, that if one of my 2 girls quit,
yeah,
I was going to be in there running equipment.
And you know what? The reason I went for it, it all goes back to mindset. I believed that was a size business that I was ready for, instead of going after a $3-4 million revenue business. And I think that's why we all make those mistakes, and experience most of the time, and getting around other people that have already passed those levels of experience. That's the only thing that's going to expedite your belief system. I mean, we are worst enemy. It is you against you out there. And if you can ever get past that and know you've got value, the same amount of effort goes into a $5 million company as it does into a $1 million company. It's just easier because revenue solves problems. So why not go after something that's already producing cash flow?
And that brings up a good point about starting a business versus buying one. I mean, I would have, if I had to start, I think we had maybe 11 businesses total at one time. If I had to start every single one of those myself, I would have I can't imagine. We only started out maybe 2 or 3. I can't remember exactly, but those startups, I don't know that they ever returned enough to justify the labor I put into the startup side of it versus what I could have walked into a profit center right out of the gate for.
Yeah.
It's 10 times as much work on a startup than you think it's going to be. Whatever you think if you've never done it, whatever you think it's going to be, multiply it by 10. It's going to be way more. You know that. I know Chris knows that.
Yeah, man. When people call me, hey, I've got this great idea, and it's like, great, is it running already? Nope, not interested. I don't.
Have you guys ever had a friend and they work in, say, a cubicle or whatever? Nothing wrong with that, but they're a 9-to-5 guy, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to start a business. I want free time. I'm like, bro, what are you talking about? You don't know anything.
Yeah.
You will have no free time. Yep. Or if you do, your business will fail. And that's when that happens to people too. And then you ask them the next time, they're like, oh yeah, I sold it, or I did this. No, you didn't. It just dissolved.
Yeah, there's something that happened that took it out. And I cringe on those things. The one that I kind of regret starting up the most was a liquor store. So it's done good, but the amount of money we had to feed it with on the front side isn't going to come really back out until we sell.
Wow. Because of inventory?
Inventory, and just at first we didn't hardly have any sales, but our labor stayed the same. Well, now then our sales are just, I mean, we're probably doing, this is a 1,000 square foot store, and we're doing 100 and some thousand a month out of it. So now then the profit's good, but we'd have to hold it another 5 years to really get our money back. And we can't cash out refi that thing. It's not, it just doesn't work that way. And so my partner's buying me out of it because he wants to retire and just run it. That works. But if I would have put that much time into anything else, buying 5 businesses, I would have had less time than starting up that one business that just does just over $1 million a year in revenue.
Wow. So I got this question, and it's okay whichever way you answer it, because we want a true opinion, even though we focus more on business on this side. But me and Kevin both love business and real estate, and we believe that's the 2 pillars to wealth creation. But going back, all right, let's take the person that's sitting in the cubicle, and they're saying, look, I realize that this is not going to create wealth for my family. Do I go jump into real estate, or do I go jump in and buy a business? Not startup, but do a business acquisition. What would you do if you were in that position at this point with your knowledge?
Probably a business first.
Why?
There's a couple things. I mean, real estate, as you guys know, right now with rates is really hard to enter the marketplace. Mm-hmm. Cap rates are at 7% and interest is 7%. It's inverted now, where we were paying I think 3.25 to 3.5 last year on interest rates and buying 7 and 8 caps. Now that, I mean, you can't really get a good cash flow without a massive price or a massive
discount
on the purchase price. Now, for somebody that's had a portfolio for 5 years or longer, you've rode the appreciation and the rent boosts up enough that you can really justify taking less cash flow on a deal because it's not going to disrupt anything. And you start looking at appreciation and debt reduction over a 5 to 7 year period. And on big assets, it can be massive. But it would be really hard to go buy a $10 million asset right now in the real estate side and live off of the cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
You buy a $10 million business right now.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's a completely different set of cash flow. You know, we hit a point where I really didn't want more cash flow because I was having to use all of my depreciation from new acquisitions to offset depreciation. But until you get to that point, I think cash flow is probably the blood of your, you know, of everything, trying to get that cash flow built up enough where you're not worried about what happens next month.
Yeah.
So and just the economy where we're at, I think there's going to be opportunity in businesses. Yeah. All the guys that have the big businesses are older, probably looking to get out of them in the next few years. It's harder to deal with employees than it was 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. I'd say a lot of those are burnt out, and there's going to be opportunity there. The opportunity in real estate is still there, but it's going to take a level of faith to close on a transaction that doesn't cash flow, knowing in a couple of years you're going to refi it back out and it's going to be a monster cash flowing asset. Coming in for your first purchase, you're probably not going to have that kind of faith, if that makes sense. Where you go buy $1 million business that maybe nets, I don't know what the numbers are anymore, 300,000, 500,000, 200,000, whatever it may be. Your payment on that business is going to be very small compared to the cash flow. Right. I think we were usually 3x debt service on a lot of our businesses that we bought, and really didn't have them amortized very long. So in 5 years, a lot of our debt was gone on businesses. That doesn't happen in real estate.
When you were leveraging debt, were you going? What did that loan process look like?
On the business side or on?
Yeah, on the business.
I didn't get a lot of debt on the business side unless it was seller finance. So I had a couple of them. One of them, I say seller finance, I had to pay for the business before I took it over, but he let me make payments on it. So I was making $5,000 a month payments towards the business, and I took it over. Then another one, it was already a seller finance on the building, and then he seller finance from another, like the first party. The second party that I was buying it from, he financed me the business. The first party financed me the real estate.
Okay.
So I walked in with $30,000 into that business, and then in 18 months, I had to pay off his other $30,000 loan, and then I just had $150 left on the real estate to pay back. So it wasn't great terms on some of that. I probably should have structured it better, but I just thought I wanted to pay everything off, you know, get all the debt reduced as fast as possible at that time. Because I was coming off of 10 years in the service business already, and I was burnt out and thinking I just wanted to scale back and kind of go more into, I'm not going to say retirement because it's just not what I really wanted, but more freedom. Then after a couple of years of leveraging debt in business and real estate, you know, equipment wise, if I had equipment in a business and I bought it at a discount, I'd go to the bank and ask for a line of credit against that equipment. And sometimes buy the equipment for $50,000, it'd be worth $200,000.
It's a pro tip right there.
Yeah, they give me $70,000 or $80,000 against it at 4 or 5% interest only.
Yeah. So it sounds like the businesses are the low hanging fruit right now. Cash flow is still king. That's the game. And what's the two skill sets? Because we're getting, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. What's the two main skill sets that you would tell people to start, one or two, to start really mastering so that they can be great business owners?
Operations, I think, is probably by far the most important to me. and being able to develop banking relationships. The operations side, if you can't look at numbers and know where they should be on a business, that's information that you can get a hold of in groups like this. Everything else, like insurance, when we take over businesses, I can go right in and say, man, they're paying way too much on insurance. I should be able to reduce that by 40 or 50%. Their trash bill, they don't have a good trash, like on apartment complexes, I see this, or restaurants. They'll be paying 15 grand a year for trash, and we can get the same service for 3,000 to 4,000 a year. Utilities, I'll go in and look, and if they haven't done a LED upgrade, I can look and see they're spending massive amounts of money on warehouse space with old fluorescent lights in it, and I know I can reduce electric by 30%. Just stuff like that, just seeing where all the points I can drop expenses, and it may not be profitable for them, but it might be profitable enough for us to take over and service our debt until we grow the business, which is what I did a lot of. Same as like phone bills, being able to go in and say, I can add a line for $10 to my plan, but they're paying $300 for a phone system or whatever.
Yeah.
So I would say just learning those numbers, looking at tons of profit and loss statements of whatever business or whatever industry somebody's looking to go in. So that way, when you do start out, and you track the numbers every single day, where I was tracking them quarterly at best. Now then I want to see my numbers every day to know whether we're trending up or trending down, and making sure my staff sees those same numbers every day.
Interesting. Yeah. All right, man. Look,
thanks so much for coming on.
We want to get your Capitalist Cartel link in the comments. So when you hop off, if you don't mind putting it in the comments. I know y'all said y'all were closed right now, so when you open back up, but I'm in that group. Highly recommend it. Real estate and crypto is the main points of interest there. But as you said, you communicate a lot about business as well, because really you guys are running real estate businesses. It's not just I got a couple of houses over here for rent. You're running real estate businesses, so that's why business does get talked about over there. Highly recommend it, and I really appreciate your time. Tons of value, and this is probably the highest viewers live that we've had on any interview so far. So thanks for really bringing
that. That was great. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Anytime you guys need me, let me know. I'd be glad to jump on again.
All right. Thanks so much.
See you later.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks.